Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 12:48. We are here live for the Artemis 1 mission launch. And we are, first I want to say good morning to everybody all over the world jumping in here. We are live for the Artemis 1 mission launch on November 16th, 2022. The mission is planned to launch at 1:04. The launch window opens at 1:04. Ooh, should have done a couple of practice rounds with my morning voice here. So our launch window is still scheduled to open at 1:04. We are currently at T-minus 10 minutes, and we have a scheduled hold. The scheduled hold started about 15 minutes ago and is supposed to last 30 minutes. The newest news that we have gotten recently is that we did see a little bit of complications with the hydrogen fueling lines. There were some leaks in the lines. They have since been fixed, but the engineers are currently taking a look at it to see how long this hold might last. So we will most likely not see the launch at exactly 1:04, but it does not seem like it is going to be a huge hold as of yet. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this T-minus clock up here. This is the NASA space flight live stream. So this one will keep our eyes on the rocket the whole time. And then we have NASA's live stream as well with some different angles and our NASA anchor, which will be keeping us up to date on a lot of that information. But since we are still a few minutes out from that launch window, we're going to start with just some background information on the launch itself, some information about the rocket itself, and then we will keep you posted right up to the point where the rocket actually launches. So for right now, we are going to just jump over into this stream, just take a look at the rocket from the outside. So it is 12:50 in Florida right now, so it is the very early morning for the crew. So here is our SLS rocket all lit up, and a lot of the support systems around the rocket are actually in the dark right now. So we'll be jumping to a lit up view, a photograph taken of the SLS during the day, so we can look at some of those launch support systems before we talk pre-launch. But one thing to notice in this is this big ball of fire down here in the bottom right corner. So during tanking operations, as they fill this rocket with fuel, which they've been doing for about the last 8 hours, there can be extra fuel and things that need to be burnt off on the side. So that valve you're seeing over there, or that fire that you're seeing, is extra fuel being burnt off. So one of the things that you normally don't see during a daytime operation, because the flame is not large enough to make out during the day, but we can see it right now. So here's a nice top angle. They were talking about the hydrogen leaks, and these leaks here, this chilled air coming out, are not the best sign right now. So we may have to take a look at the live update in just a second here. Next up, though, we do want to jump into the Artemis mission. So we're going to look at a couple detailed plans of the Artemis mission itself. So the Artemis 1 is one of 3 planned Artemis missions to go to the moon. So the Artemis 1 mission will be launching hopefully this morning. It'll be taking off from Earth. It'll be doing the different parts of Artemis will fall apart. So we have booster rockets, we have our core stage that will all fall apart. And then we have our main spacecraft, which is the Orion spacecraft, which will detach once the spacecraft gets into, we're going to call it low Earth orbit. So once it gets into space itself, the parts will fall away, and the Orion spacecraft itself will detach and prepare for its mission to the moon. It will do a half orbit of Earth using what is commonly referred to as a slingshot maneuver to get itself into the intralunar injection point. So that will be, it will use the Earth's gravity, slingshot itself around, and then its last stage booster, which is the ICPS will actually blast, and that will give it the last push that it needs to make its way towards the moon. Once it gets towards the moon, it will do a first dip very close to the moon. So its first pass over the moon will take it very, very close to the lunar surface, and then it will use somewhat of a slingshot maneuver to actually get itself into lunar orbit. At that point, it will be orbiting around the moon. It will do a few circuits around the moon, and then it will return itself to Earth, where it will test the last feature of it, which is the Orion re-entry vehicle. So that is what the astronauts will eventually be using to come back to the Earth. So the Artemis 1 is a test of all these systems, and they will be using all these systems to hopefully get humans to the surface of the moon in the near future. Let's jump back into our live launch here and see if we are getting any updates on the status of the launch.
Probably looking at the clock and wondering when we might see the launch today. So lovely to see all those people.
And there's the Space and Rocket Center, where we have a ton of people waving their flags, cheering us on tonight for this incredible launch this evening.
I love that. They totally look like cheerleaders, and they're embracing it. I love it. And yeah, this is the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. This is the Visitor Center over in Huntsville, Alabama. As I've said before, Marshall Space Flight Center there is super instrumental in what the Artemis program is doing. They contributed a lot to the mission, so it's nice to see everyone there. And then here is Airbus in Bremen, Germany. So Airbus is the main contractor for the European Space Agency, and together the company and ESA, they provided the European Service Module, which is an important part of the Orion spacecraft. So we have quite a bit of people there. A more reasonable time over there in Germany. It is 7 a.m. So I'm going to say Guten Morgen to them. Did I say it right? Guten Morgen to them over there in Bremen, Germany. Again, the
All right, so it looks like we're just jumping around to different view. Oh, here we go.
Who's inside there and has an update for us.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. So we are clearly in a delay now. The NASA test director, who's basically flying the ship for the launch countdown tonight, has said that we are extending the hold that we were currently in at T-minus 10 minutes and counting. And so that puts us off the 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time launch. We're now slipping indefinitely into the hold. NASA test director Carlos Monge saying that we are currently estimating how much work needs to be done before resuming the polling that is supposed to take place 15 minutes before launch. It then goes to terminal count at T-minus 10 minutes. Now we've got an update on the tanking of the upper stage liquid hydrogen tank. Currently 95% filled. We're in topping on that tank. It is the last of 4 tanks in the Space Launch System that needed to be completely fueled up before we launch. Of course, cryogenic tanking, a complex operation that has seen some delays tonight. We had a roughly hour delay after a replenish valve on the core stage liquid hydrogen side required hands-on work by a Red Crew team that went out to the launch pad and tightened down some bolts on the valve and got it fixed before leaving the launch pad, and then launch team verifying that that work was complete. Now currently we're awaiting some work with the range. The 45th Space Wing, which oversees the range here and makes sure that the airspace and the ocean out over the flight path is clear, and also has the responsibility to destruct the rocket should it go off track. They have been working on some issues with their equipment and sending a flight termination signal to the rocket. There is testing that must happen with the flight termination system that was delayed by a bad Ethernet switch. Switch has been changed out, and now the range is looking to start testing their connectivity to the rocket in order to preserve that safety function that they are responsible for. So again, we are slipping now indefinitely into the launch window. We're awaiting the launch team to evaluate.
All right, so it looks like we are going into the holding point here, which we had mentioned at earlier today. They ran into some of the issues with the cryogenic fueling of the main hydrogen tank, which is the upper portion. Ooh, we're going to have to take a look at the rocket because I forget which one is actually on top. I believe the hydrogen tank is on top of the rocket. So let's jump over to that right now, and we'll take a look at some of the parts of this rocket, and we wanted to take a look at it in the light. So let's jump over to this photograph right here, and we can open this up. There we go. So here is the SLS. This picture was taken when it was originally rolled out to the launch pad a few months ago. You can see the control tower over on the right side here, what is known as the umbilical tower, with all the cords and cables connecting to the rocket itself. And if we look down along the sides, you will see a plethora of tubes and pipes and electrical wiring running down there. Those are all connecting to the rocket right now. The fuel is being run through there. A lot of the electrical systems are being run through there, and the systems are all being charged through there. So all of our batteries should be fully charged and all those good things. And we will see all of those umbilical systems drop away just before the rocket itself actually launches. One of the big things that we had brought up, that was actually brought up in class the other day, because a student asked what happens if the system itself, the rocket, gets hit by lightning. And being one of the tallest metal structures on the coast of Florida right now is not an ideal place for a large, tall metal structure, since Florida is very prone to storms, including electrical storms. They saw 2 hurricanes earlier this year, one of them forcing the SLS to roll back into its protective shelter. So protecting itself from lightning is a big priority. So in the back here, you can see one of the 4 lightning towers. So this tower stands, if we can get it from another angle, you'll see that the towers are significantly taller to make themselves a much taller, more attractive target. They are also charged to try and attract any lightning strikes, and they also have this wiring that you can see running around here, going all over around the rocket to make a very attractive bullseye to any lightning that may come to the area, because you do not want a lightning strike, an uncontrolled electrical burst, hitting any type of electrical component, but especially one that is full of explosive fuel. All kinds of things could go wrong, the most dangerous of which would be the ignition of the multiple tanks of explosive fuel, possibly destroying the entire system itself during an electrical strike. So every preventative measure is taken to keep this thing from getting struck by lightning. So those are the lightning towers right there. So you will see them, in quite a few of the pictures and images that we look at today. And you will see that there are, I believe there are 4 of them working in conjunction around the launch system itself. Let's jump into a look at the Artemis launch system. Get my live news updates over here. So the rocket itself is a brand new rocket. This rocket is the most powerful rocket that, if it launches today, will have ever been launched. And the reason it is the most powerful rocket that has ever been launched is the mission that is being attempted today has never been attempted before. The Apollo missions back in the early 70s and late 60s originally got us to the moon and famously landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 1969. However, they went with a very light system. Their planned EVA, or extravehicular activity, their time on the moon, was very short. The SLS is looking to extend that. It's looking to put much larger things onto the moon and carry a much larger payload to the moon. So the rocket is significantly larger and significantly more powerful than its Saturn V predecessor, which was the rocket that came before this. It's the Apollo rocket that took the multiple missions, 7, I believe, missions that actually made it to lunar orbit and onto the lunar surface. So the goal of the Space Launch System is to be able to bring early colonization components to the lunar surface. So a much larger payload going at a much same distance. The moon has not gotten farther away, but a much larger payload. So if we take a look at the rocket here, it has our very standard core booster. So this is our core booster, core stage booster rocket. And that is what is being filled right now. So we have our, let's see if it does tell me. I just want confirmation. We're going to have to take a look inside the boosters. But there is one fuel tank up top. I believe this is our hydrogen or liquid hydrogen tank that is up top. And then we have our liquid oxygen tank, which I believe is on the bottom here. So this orange component is made up of 2 fuel containers that will provide a good amount of the thrust. We also have our solid rocket boosters. So those are chemical rocket boosters, and those are just full from the time they get to the launch pad. So we have our 2 solid rocket boosters on the sides, and those will be our initial thrusters that will drop off early on in the flight. So these 2 will drop off and actually fall into the ocean where they will be recovered. And then our main core stage booster will ignite itself and take us on the following 8 minutes until we get to low Earth orbit. And I'm seeing some people in the chat over there. Love to see it. I'm glad you guys are up and smiling. So that is the main booster. But the big stuff, the real important, well, I don't want to call them important, but the big components of this, the stars of our show, is the Orion spacecraft, which sits atop all of these boosters. This is what we are trying to get into space. So you can see everything down below here. All these boosters are just to get this upper stage into low Earth orbit. Good morning, everybody. So we have the Orion spacecraft up at the top, and that is just this small capsule right here. That's the Orion spacecraft. So that is where the humans will eventually go. Underneath that is the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. Try saying that one a couple of times fast. But that is what is going to, once we get into low Earth orbit, it will provide the final burn or thrust that will get us to the moon. And so it will send us from low Earth orbit. It will send us on that slingshot maneuver around the Earth and then send us on our trajectory towards the moon, overcoming the pull of Earth's gravity, fighting against that and working its way into the pull of the lunar gravity. So this last component here will also perform a burn, and then it will fall away as well. And interestingly, this component, after it thrusts the Orion spacecraft towards the moon, this component itself will fall away and work its way to a trajectory towards the sun, where it will perform a couple of orbits around the sun and then finally terminate by actually crashing itself into the sun. So the sun has become NASA's waste receptacle. If we need to get rid of something, we don't like leaving things floating around out in space, especially when we plan on sending manned missions later on. We don't want to run into any of those things, and we don't want to fill space with garbage. So if we need to get rid of something, there's a couple of things we can do with it. We can either drop it back towards Earth, where many things will burn up in Earth's atmosphere, or we can get them on a trajectory that will take them into the sun itself and be destroyed by the sun. It is 1:04, so that launch window has opened up. We are still on the hold here, and the hold is currently planned indefinitely, so we'll keep an eye on that for any updated information. But we are going to watch for that T- right here, and we're looking for that T- to start itself back up. So we are at that hold at T-10 minutes, and L- 10 minutes. That is our launch time. L- 10 minutes. And what all that time is about is outlined in our mission control timeline, which I have right here. So let's take a look at our launch countdown. So we've all heard of the T-minus, and the movies, they always go to the T-minus and the countdown and then the blast off to the rocket. Before the T-minus, there is actually something called an L-minus, and it starts about 48 hours before the launch. So this L-minus countdown started 47 hours and 40 minutes before the launch. So you can see it right here. And if you travel over to nasa.gov and head to the Artemis mission, you can look through the entire list, and it will show you just about everything that NASA runs through their checklist as they prepare themselves for the launch itself. So you can see it 47 hours out. The launch team is arriving on their stations. Countdown clock is beginning. Things like that. And then we start to do some of the more basic systems. So our water tank. We'll take a look at the picture of that. That's the sound suppression system. All that stuff starts to be filled up, and they're powering things up. They're going to start to charge some of the batteries and things like that. As we work our way through, there are certain checklists that they have to do. As outlined earlier, launching a rocket is not like jumping in your car and going to the grocery store. There's a lot that needs to be done. So especially fueling the tanks. The liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen are kept at excruciatingly low temperatures. We're talking negative 173 degrees Celsius. So those temperatures are far too cold, and especially dealing with hydrogen, which is an incredibly small atom and incredibly molecularly small, it does not like to stay in one place for very long. So once you fuel the system, you can't just leave gas in the tank. It will seep out. It will warm up. It will chill the rocket itself. And you don't want those things happening. So you do them at select times. So as we work our way down here, you will see 15 hours and counting. And we have a bunch. We got the charge going. 15 hours out, we have some changeovers and the fueling. I might have gone over the fueling here, but they will start to fuel it, and it takes about 8 hours to fully fuel those tanks. And that is where we ran into the issue that we are currently seeing, which is the fueling of the hydrogen tank. It's right around the same place. Here we go. 8 hours and counting is when they start. You can see all the fill. Our LOX would be our liquid oxygen, and then our LH2 is our liquid hydrogen tank. Here's a nice look at the launch system itself. Those multiple launch towers. It looks like lightning towers. It looks like there are 3 lightning towers set around the launch system, creating that triangle, and then also connected by those wires. So any lightning in the area will hit that. This is that liquid suppression system. So it's just a water tower, but that water tower is specially designed to basically empty its entire contents very, very quickly. So just before the launch actually happens, that tower will begin to drain and pour water over the launch pad. That water will absorb some of the impact from the rockets themselves, which are launching at incredibly hot temperatures. So it will not only protect the launch pad itself, but it also works to be a sound suppression system, which will keep the sound as quiet as possible. You can imagine a rocket launching is basically just a gigantic controlled explosion, and it is quite loud. A expert that I was speaking with earlier today actually lived in the Cape Canaveral area during the Apollo missions and spoke of their windows being rattled anytime there was an Apollo launch. The Apollo launch system was the Saturn V rocket, and it was one of the most powerful rockets up to this one, and it rattled their windows many, many miles away, even causing damage to people's windows and shattering windows miles and miles from the launch site itself. So everything is being done to try and keep that from happening. But again, it is still going to be an extremely loud rocket launch. And we will be able to see some of those downward facing cameras, and we should see some of the water pouring onto the pad when that happens. Down into the last parts of this, we have the 5 hours and counting. So again, we can see all those fuels, the liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, things like that. Telemetry data going in, 50 minutes out. This was a little while ago. And then we get down to our 30-minute cooldown, which was the hold we were just in. And that is when the launch director, who we figured out today is Charlie Blackwell. She is the first female launch director, so we should be able to see her in mission control when they flash through those on the live stream. We'll see if we can see her and point those out, and then go through all of that. So we are at this T minus 10 minutes, and once that starts, that means that all the systems are doing really well. They're going to set the last couple of things on, and then it's really kind of go from there for the most part. Fingers crossed. There are a couple of things that they'll be going through, so you can see all of this right here. And then we get to a very, very key moment, and something that we want to be listening for very carefully as we get to T minus 33 seconds. That is when the go for automated launch sequencer will be given. So that is the last chance for any of the systems operators, any of the different stations. Let's see, we are not in mission control. Anybody in mission control to say that something is not the way they want it to be. So if they do see anything that is off, that is not looking good, at that point they will give the no-go, and the launch controller will be able to put a hold on the system. So they can hold it all the way up to that point. Once they go for the automated launch sequencer, at that point it is all hands off. The computers will be running a automated sequence that is going to launch this rocket on its own. So all hands are away. Once they activate that, the systems that begin to run are non-reversible. So all of those systems, including that water suppression system, the draining of the tank, things like that, there is no going back from there. So if something does go wrong in those last 33 seconds, the mission itself will have to be completely scrubbed and reset. So those last 33 seconds are the real nail-biting moments when it is either a go or no go. But at that point, there are no pauses, there are no holds. They either need to scrap the mission or they need to prepare themselves for liftoff itself. So it looks like our live launch system is doing a little bit of what we're doing here, a little bit of vibing to pass through the time. And let's see if our T-minus clock is still being held at those 10 minutes. So, a couple of other things. Here they're speaking of the lunar orbit insertion, which is that loop around on this really cool screen they have here. We might have to step our game up for next time. A couple of last things that we wanted to talk about. And there's our map. There's our other countdown. All right, so this is the crew behind. We wanted to try and get a picture in mission control. So this is mission control over on the right side here. It's been a little bit updated since those Apollo missions that I'm sure people are familiar with. The mission control station with all the computer terminals and then the big screen in front of them. Still the same basic operations. You can see lots and lots of computer screens and teams of engineers working behind them. And this is Charlie Blackwell right here. So this is our launch director. So she's the one calling all the shots and pulling all the strings and making any final decisions. Whereas the teams, so we have our flight director right here. These different teams that will be looking at all those different systems and then given the go, no go at those different crucial points. So if you would like to read more about this, you can jump over to the nasa.gov website and then go to missions and Artemis, and they have all kinds of great information about everything that is going on. So here we go. There's a good look at mission control. So here's our mission control. We have the names of all the different systems. So we got our ECOMs, our MPOs, our boosters, and all of these different groups are looking at the different systems. So we can actually see on their computers a lot of the information. So our booster group, it looks like our booster group is up in the front there. We can't see them, but that is the boosters are the ones that are looking, seeing some things that they are not happy with right now, which is why we are in the hold that we are currently in. All the other ones are looking at their systems, making sure everything is a go. But again, it is separated, compartmentalized. So your team is responsible for your job and you make the call. So each one of these small pods here makes the call as to whether or not they are comfortable with going ahead with the launch. And the flight director will check with them on several marked occasions and ask for the go, no go. And they will give a go, no go, meaning yes, everything looks good, we like what we're seeing, or no, there's something wrong with our systems and we need to take a pause here. And that will tell the flight director whether or not they can launch. Here is a little outline. Let's open this up and we can see what it looks like. So here's a just an overhead view of that system itself. So we have that big screen in the front showing a lot of key information over there. And then you can see all of our different stations. So the camera that we were looking at was right here. We had the EM PO that was over on the side, mechanical and power office, boosters, control, all of these different things. And then we have our main flight operations, which would be way in the back so they can kind of oversee everything and all of these different stations working together, keeping an eye on the big screen with all our main information as well. So hopefully we'll get a look inside the launch control station. I'm sure it is a beehive of activity right now. It looks like our live streams are keeping themselves pretty much right where they are. We have this gentleman rocking his really cool screen over there with the neon mission path orbit. And since his is a little bit fancier than mine, we can take a look at that so you can, and they go away from it as soon as I start talking, of course. All right, so let's jump in here and see if we have any updates on our hold. We are now at 120, so let's see if there's any new information.
Why the moon? Well, here's why.
We are going. The history of this agency is marked with broken barriers, once viewed as impossible, with science fiction turned reality, with innovations that have spun industries all their own, and with demonstrations of peace for all humankind.
We soar in the skies of our home planet. We maintain a human presence just outside of gravity, and we touch points all across the solar system and beyond. We're going back to the moon, and this is why.
The moon is a treasure trove of science.
It holds opportunities for us to make discoveries about our home planet, about our sun,
and about our solar system.
The wealth of knowledge to be gleaned from the moon will inspire a new generation of thought and action.
Without fail, every major program and mission NASA has invested in has led to technologies and capabilities that have shaped our culture.
The breakthroughs of the Artemis era will define our generation and the generations to follow.
The tens of thousands of jobs associated with propelling us to the moon today are just the beginning of a lunar economy that will see hundreds of thousands of new jobs develop around the world.
This is not an ambition of one entity or one country. The exploration of the moon is a shared effort,
woven together by a desire for the greater good.
Why the moon? Because the missions of tomorrow will be sparked by the accomplishments of the Artemis generation today.
Because the ambition to go has already begun.
And because Mars is calling. We need to learn what it takes to establish a community on another cosmic shore. So let's camp close before pushing out.
And so, we go to the moon now, not as a series of isolated missions, but to build a community on and around the moon capable of proving how to live on other worlds.
We'll use the lessons from more than 50 years of peaceful exploration to send a new generation to the lunar surface to stay.
We will anchor our efforts on the lunar South Pole to establish the Artemis Base Camp. positioning us for long-term science and exploration of the lunar surface.
We will prove what it takes to assemble a complex ship in deep space.
We will perfect descending down to and returning from a distant surface.
We will learn how humans can survive and thrive in a partial gravity environment.
With improved spacesuit designs, mobile habitats, and with reconnaissance robots pre-positioning and relocating supplies.
We will learn how to utilize the resources we find on these other worlds, starting with finding water ice and purifying it to drinkable water.
And refining that into hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe.
We will establish fission power plants on the surface of the moon capable of supporting a growing community of efforts.
And we will expand the logistics supply chain to enable commercial and international partners
to resupply and refuel deep space outposts.
None of this is simple or easy, but nothing in our history ever has been.
The Eagle has landed. We got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
This kind of continuous lunar presence is a natural extension of all that we've learned in low Earth orbit. And what we will accomplish there will ensure the monumental missions to Mars are within reach. As we ready the launch of the first Artemis mission, and as commercial companies ready their lunar landers for the first private payload deliveries, we have already begun to take the next step.
Throughout this launch broadcast, our NASA's Leah Martin has been introducing us to people over at the Kennedy Space Center.
All right, some pretty cool stuff there. I just want to check out that video. So the big question on a lot of people's minds right now is why the moon? Why are we going back to the moon? The Apollo missions took us to the moon in the late 60s after the directive from John F. Kennedy, his famous I have a dream. That's not John F. Kennedy. His famous going to the moon speech, we choose to go to the moon, back at Rice in the early 1960s. He laid down the directive that we would land men on the moon before the decade was out, and the NASA was able to do that in 1969, landing Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon and actually walking around on the lunar surface before returning safely to Earth. Since that time, there have been incredible discoveries made about the lunar surface and about space in general. We have since made it to the moon several times with landers and rovers. We have also made it to Mars with several different missions, including the Curiosity rover and the Perseverance rover, and they are places that we want to explore much further. The moon actually opened up some of its secrets after we launched a mission a few years ago that discovered quite a bit of frozen water on the moon. And frozen water is gold when you're talking about space. It's better than gold. It's fuel. Water is made of hydrogen and oxygen. H2O is its chemical composition, and H2O is what is needed to launch a rocket. It is what we are using to launch our rocket today. So if we are able to mine and process that liquid water on the moon, we can separate out the hydrogen and the oxygen and use it for rocket fuel, basically allowing us to turn the moon into a gas station, a lunar gas station where rockets bound for deeper space can go refuel in space or in lunar orbit and then propel themselves farther into space. So it can act as what has become known as the gateway that will allow us to explore deeper space. One of the most difficult parts about getting into space is simply fighting Earth's gravity, getting out of overcoming Earth's gravitational force. That requires a lot of fuel. Again, taking a look at the SLS system, the vast majority of it are these booster rockets, just made to get this little teeny spacecraft out of Earth's orbit and away from Earth's gravity. So we need all these booster systems here just to pull that one off. And if we are able to then go and refuel in space, we're off on we're looking pretty good, and we can propel ourselves farther into space. So again, the end mission here, or the future mission, is to get and establish a lunar colony on the lunar surface, on the moon, a permanent colony with employees, workers who work there on a regular basis, doing all those different jobs that we laid out earlier. So I got some questions popping in here. If you want to fire some questions of your own in the chat, you certainly can. It looks like we're going to have a little bit more time here. We are still in this countdown pause, so we are not 100% sure when we are going to restart that T- countdown. There were some issues with the hydrogen fueling system, and we are waiting for the engineers to get back to us, and it looks like we have possibly some news here.
Thank you so much, guys, for your contribution to the program, and can't wait to see Orion and SLS launch. Okay, so now let's head back over to Daryl Nail over with the launch team so we can hear any updates about a new team.
All right, here come the updates.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. And a clearer picture is starting to emerge as the launch team now reports out that they only have a few minutes left of work to do before they're ready to pick up polling. And we're also hearing that some of that polling, which kicks off with the mission management team, is also now just about 3.5 minutes away. Now, we are currently still in that hold, but the launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside Firing Room 1, where Launch Director Charlie Blackwell-Thompson is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around a quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate. In this launch window, which we're currently 26 minutes into, and it's 2 hours long, it runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. We have what's called 40 cutouts. And in those cutouts, they range from about a second to about a minute. These are times where they can't launch. These cutouts must be accounted for when determining a new T0. The upper stage of the rocket, which was the last to get ready and configured, just recently the team cycled the liquid hydrogen valves, which is required, and they are currently working on the LO2 valves, liquid oxygen valves in the upper stage. That work is almost done.
All right, so it sounds like all good news from NASA. The work that is being done is almost done. It sounds like we will get an actual estimation of the countdown pretty soon. In that time, we got a quick question coming from our chat about where the what are we looking at here? Where is the Space Launch System? So we're going to jump over to Google Maps right here. And we can see on our Google Maps, we are launching from Cape Canaveral, Florida. So this is one of the United States' premier launch stations, especially for NASA. So zooming out to all of the United States and then back in to Florida. You can see our eastern coast over here. And if we keep on cruising in just outside Orlando, we have this large area of undeveloped land over here, so marshes and things like that. And if we keep going in, you can see it all the way from up here. We have the Kennedy Space Center. This is the center of it here, and then all these roads leading off it lead to different launch pads. So we have all these different launch stations here. And I just had it earlier, and I believe it is, that's 39. We are at 37B. So that's 39, the launch station. You can see it there. 39A down there, and we are at 37. So let me see if I can get back on that. I just had it before. Believe it is, here we go. So right here, this is 37A and 37B, and the Space Launch System itself is at 37B. So right here, you can see some of the components of this picture. We don't know when exactly this picture was taken. What it looks like, there is something. It could be the tower, maybe. But it looks like there is something on the launch pad when this picture was taken. And then we have the path itself that the rover, which is carrying, the crawler, which is carrying the launch system, would have come down from the complex itself, the Launch Storage Center, which is 4 miles away, and I'm not 100% sure where that is. It's potentially this one right here. Possibly over here. I'm not exactly sure where the... Oh, it looks like that might be it right there. It is a very tall building, and then you can see some tracks coming straight out of it. So that's potentially the building where they store it when there is storms and things like that. It's what it went back to during Hurricane Ian earlier on this year. So we are launching from Cape Canaveral, Florida. And people in the Cape Canaveral area are in for quite a treat. If you are not there to see the rocket, if you're not there to actually see the rocket itself launch, I don't know what you're doing. Get there if you're in the Cape Canaveral area. But if you are in the Florida area, there is actually quite a distance that you can see it. Let's see if we can bring up the... I do not see our picture here. Possibly over in images. Let's see. Here we go. The visibility range. So if you are in the Florida area, there is a visibility range. Once the SLS launches, as it begins its ascent, you will be able to see it from quite a distance, all the way up to Savannah, Georgia over here. You will be able to see the rocket while it is in air. So if you are in that area... I don't know how many viewers we have in the Savannah area, but if you are in that area, make sure to get yourself outdoors and look to your southeast here after launch, because you will be able to see the Artemis actually launching. And because it is very early morning, the dark night sky should provide the perfect backdrop for you to see those massive engine boosters. Just shuttling through the night sky. Again, you can see our time here. The Artemis will not be visible for very long because it is moving quite fast and getting to a pretty high altitude. So after that 70 seconds here, you can see it right down here. After that 70 seconds, it'll be at 40,000 feet, which is a little bit higher than a commercial aircraft flies. And at that point, it's going to be so far, it's going to be incredibly small and basically disappear from view. So unfortunately for many of us at Nestler Labs HQ over here in New Jersey, we are not going to be able to see it due to the curvature of the Earth and the distance from Florida, from the Cape Canaveral Launch Center itself. Jumping back in, we still are at that T-minus 10-minute hold. So a couple more things about it. We want to take a look at the launch pad. Let's see if we can get some good images of the launch pad here and talk about some of the things that we should expect to see once this actually begins to launch. So it looks like we're looking at mostly the rocket itself and the rocket components. We'd love to get a downward look into that launch pad itself, but it doesn't look like our pictures here are going to do us any justice on that. But some of the things, we may actually be able to see it in the videos or the media resources here. Artemis 1 video gallery. Let's see if we can find... I do not have the video that I want queued up. Let's see if we can run this and see if it has what I'm looking for. So what we're looking for are the different components that will actually occur once we get into that countdown stage. So once we are ready to actually send off. And since they have not launched this system yet, the only thing we're going to be able to use are the computer graphics. But they do have some very nice computer graphics of what we should expect to see once the system launches. So let's see if we can get some of those in here. All right, it does not look like we're going to see them in here either, unfortunately. So I'll have to queue those up on the side, and then I will find exactly what it is we're looking for. But just to give you an overview to see what we should expect, see some of the key component pieces. All right, we are back. The T-minus time has started counting down, so we are at T-minus 8 minutes. So I'm going to go over to our live stream here, and we are going to turn on the audio, and I'm going to try and control my excitement during this so that we can listen to
operator, Alex Pandalos,
all the running, everything that they're running through here. So we are at that T-minus 8. So once we get, remember we have the T-minus 33 seconds is when we should hear something about the automated launch sequencer.
You can see them as they run down the rocket. That's getting them ready to detach. At liftoff, those arms will swing away. We'll let go of the rocket.
All right, so our umbilical systems here, again, those are fueling and charging all the final components. They will drop away just before launch. When we do see launch, we have about 8 minutes where the boosters will be taking us into space. We'll see several pieces falling away. First, those booster rockets on the outside, and then the main
100 commands per second.
core system. So that big orange tank will drop away, and we will see the Orion spacecraft itself. There also on top is... I'm just going to turn this guy down for a second. On top of the system itself is the launch abort system, which has never been used on board a system. If something does go wrong during launch, the launch system just above here, it's the very tip, you'll see a couple of boosters. That is actually an additional booster rocket that is able to pull the spacecraft itself away. So if there is an issue during launch, during a crewed launch with humans on board, that abort system will be able to pull them safely away. There was infamously some issues with a launch a couple of years ago where the launch system itself, you can see the abort system on top here, the launch system itself ran into some issues and the crew was in a lot of danger. So this new addition has been added to keep the crews a little bit safer. So we're going to go live here, audio. I'm going to fire up the full screen, and we are currently 6 minutes away.
The ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds.
Talking about that water that's going to flood in, these big arms right here are holding the rocket in place.
The ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high-energy systems online, starting with core stage pressurization.
All right, so we are just, woo! Can't even contain myself right now.
Fire Room 1 is completely silent as they listen for the next call.
All right, we want to listen for those calls. Hopefully,
GLS is go for core stage tank pressurization.
All right, there we go. We have a go.
Core stage tank is now pressurizing to flight levels. The replenish valve to the liquid hydrogen tank now closing.
Close-up look at
the
that.
The liquid oxygen tank will come a little
core
later.
Stage. 2 booster rockets on the side. We can see the
Orion ascent pyros and
lightning
transfer
tower
to
and that
internal
water
power.
tower in the background there. And some fuel burn off on the right side, one of those tanks.
The launch abort system, or LAS jettison motor, is now armed. On this flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the flight termination system.
So that launch abort system that he just
or
mentioned is
FTS,
actually
which
deactivated
gives the
for this
Space
mission.
Force the
So
ability
it
to
will,
destruct the rocket if it goes in the wrong direction.
we will not
Let's
see it
listen
at
in for
all.
that.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed.
It's another go.
Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
We're hoping for a downward
We've
view.
passed
We'll
that.
definitely see one during liftoff.
The cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in. They are now at the right temperature for launch. Countdown continues. T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Up next, GLS fires up the KPUs.
Palms
Those
are
are
getting
high-speed
sweaty here.
turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start.
GLS is go for core stage APU start.
That now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30
So
seconds.
all those
That
different
can proceed
systems that we
now.
talked about in mission
We will
control,
see
all those teams are running
the
their final
engines
checks and they are giving their
at the bottom
go,
of the
no
core
go.
stage.
So it looks like so far we have gotten nothing but goes. Everything is go so far. We're down to 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So we're getting through those last stages. When we do see
T-minus 3
ignition,
minutes and 10
you're
seconds,
going to
we'll
see
hear the
the
go for
booster
purge
rockets. You'll
sequence
see
4.
sprays of
That's a
sparks
helium
going
purge
across the
with
booster
the 4 core
rockets
stage engines
that are going to be
downstream of
used
the
to
propellant
ignite
valve,
the fuel.
keeping
You will also
air
see that
and
water being
moisture
poured
out.
into the well down below the tank. Those umbilical arms on the left side there of the rocket connecting it to the tower will all
GLS
drop away.
go for perp
And then there are a couple of locks which
And in
are
just a few
holding the
seconds,
rocket in
GLS will
place, which will
close the
hold
core
it for about
stage
6
lock vent,
seconds.
liquid
So
oxygen.
the engines will
White
ignite
vapor
and
cloud
the
caused
fully
super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear.
fully
You see it
blasting
coming
for
out there
about
now.
6 seconds. And then you will see the
And there it
arms
goes. It's
release,
closed.
and
Lock
they will
vent
release
closed.
the rocket and
Pressurizing
allow
the
it to
core
go
stage
up. So
lock
here we
vent
are down
to flight
inside. Those are the
levels.
RS-25 rocket engines. There are
Coming
4
up,
of them. They are the
15
most
seconds,
powerful
look for that thrust
engines
vector control
that have
actuator
ever
test.
been constructed.
Engines
and
will gimbal.
They are our main boosters, and it looks like they're running a gimbal check. There we
And
go.
there
So
they
you can
go.
see them moving there. Those gimbals. Those are what
4
will keep
core
the
stage
rocket on course.
RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space.
So this is one of the last tests they run through those gimbal
They will
systems.
operate at 109%
And we can see that they're
performance.
moving, which is good, and they all
Each
moved back
RS-25
into
thrown down
correct
a
position. They are all
500 pounds
computer
thrust.
controlled.
All
So
4,
those
200
systems are
pounds.
completely controlled by
Altogether with the
computers. The
boosters,
fine
8.8
corrections that they
million
need to
pounds of
make while the
thrust.
rocket is
GLS is go
launching
for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper stage has gone to internal power.
is way more than
So power is removed from the
what we
rocket's
want
upper stage,
humans to be
the
controlling. So they
ICPS,
will be
and it's been
completely
switched to battery
controlled,
power.
directing it as it
The
launches
same
into
milestone
space.
is coming up for the core stage at T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
All right, so we are 1 minute and 40 seconds out right now. If NASA's palms are as sweaty as mine are, hopefully they have something to wipe them on because we are nervous here.
GLS is
Nervous
go for
and
core stage
excited.
to internal power.
The rocket's core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers, is now on battery power. So there is no more hold time available because there's no more margin on the batteries. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries.
So you just heard the call
The
there.
count
There
continues.
are no holds at this point. We would have
A
to go
note
back
now,
to T-minus
shortly
10
after
minutes.
Liftoff.
And we are now within our
1
1
minute.
minute
Shortly
window.
after
So that
liftoff,
33
Mission Control
seconds is
Houston
that
will
key
take control
point
of
that
the
we are
rocket,
waiting for
and my
the
colleague,
fully
Leah
automated
Cheshire, will
sequencer.
take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On
There
board
he
the
is telling
rocket,
us about
it will
the
take over
ALS right
command
now.
and control of the rocket. ALS will check. Make sure there's
The
no
chat
holds
is buzzing
on the
right
ground
now, and
up until T-minus 2
TLS
seconds.
is go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS.
Deep
The
breaths.
Space Launch System is
What
now
they do with their
counting
T-minus?
down
We
to
got 30
liftoff
seconds
of
left, and
Orion
they
on
took it
its
away from
maiden
us.
voyage to
So
the
the ALS is engaged at this point, so it is either a launch or
Launching
scrub the
lunar
whole
cycle
thing.
to
So
count.
we are just a few seconds away from the
sound
launch.
suppressor water now flowing under the ML.
The sound suppression water is being poured in.
And here we go.
There we have the
Hydrogen burn-off
igniters are
initiated.
going there.
7,
There's our water
6,
being
5,
poured in.
4-stage engine start.
And
3,
here we go.
2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
All right, so the next thing that we're looking for here, I can't even start talking about that launch yet. Next thing we're looking for here is the max Q. That is when the greatest force is going to be exerted on this rocket. So the rocket is accelerating. It's going faster through the atmosphere. It is running into a lot of things right now. It is being shaken beyond what anybody can imagine.
Thrust quiet here in the loops in Mission Control.
People in the Florida area are looking into the sky and seeing that, which is absolutely incredible. And we are listening for that max Q. Once we pass through that max Q,
Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2
all right,
minutes,
solid
11
rocket
seconds into the
boosters
flight,
will
so
be
about
cutting
30
off here,
seconds
so you
from
can
now.
see the exhaust
quiet here in
from
Mission
there.
Control Houston
I
as
don't
we
know if
continue
this has
monitoring
any
the flight of Artemis 1.
cameras on board it.
We're
We
now
haven't
16
seen any
miles
footage
downrange
from
from
the
launch pad
rocket
Kennedy
itself.
Space Center,
Many
traveling
rockets
over
tend to have cameras
2,800
on
miles
board.
per
I'm
hour.
assuming this one does as a initial launch system, but we haven't seen any
Standing by
footage
for
from
solid
those
rocket
yet,
booster
so I
jettison
don't
and
know.
Shortly thereafter.
We should see those solid rocket boosters disengage here. There they are, breaking apart right there. So those 2 solid rocket boosters, the big white things that we saw earlier, falling away. The
solid rocket boosters
light in the, there you go. You can see the 4
177-foot
RS-25 engines there, the solid rocket boosters
Now
falling
the core
back to
stage
Earth
continues
into
to
the
power
ocean where they
flight
will
of
be
Orion, all 4
recovered.
RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
3,000 miles an hour. So those are the solid rocket boosters
2 minutes
burning
and
out
36
right
seconds
there.
into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston.
All right, nominal. Whoa,
We've still
look
got
at this
4 jet
guy.
engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service
So it
module.
looks like we are
Those
looking
will
to
separate
track
about
this
3
thing, and
minutes
it's a little bit
11 seconds
difficult
into
in the
flight.
night.
Very
They're
shortly
tracking this.
thereafter will be
This
followed
camera is
by the
probably
launch
back
abort
at Cape
system
Canaveral, so
separation.
we are quite a distance away.
Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange.
All right,
We
so we're
just had
83 miles. So
confirmation
one of
that
the
the
big
service
things
module fairing
that is
has
going on right
separated.
now, the rocket. Here we go. We have some cameras on the inside here.
And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members.
All right, so we got the call that the launch abort system has pulled itself away, so that is intended to happen. It looks like we are looking at a...
We just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff.
All right, so it looks like they're
However,
going
we
to jump
still have
over
4
to
good
some
engines, all at maximum
graphics
thrust right now,
of
powering
what is
the
going
first
on
flight
right
of
now
Artemis
because
at
we have lost
5,200
our
miles
visual
per
of
hour,
it. So the rocket is
148
currently
miles downrange.
on its way out. You can see that the top cover has been removed. I don't need to put my mouse out there. You can see it. So you can see that that top cover has removed that launch abort system, which sat atop the rocket itself, has blasted away. We got just a few minutes remaining until we get to that TLI burn, that translunar injection point where it will actually orbit the Earth and then send itself on its way to the moon, which will take an additional 2 days.
Panels, fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange.
All right, so let's hope we can get some footage of the rocket itself. Once it gets into low Earth orbit, we should see that initial core stage fall away, and it should actually see the sun rise once it gets high enough. So it is currently in the dark, but once it gets high enough over the Earth, the sun will actually rise on the rocket far earlier than it will on Earth. So it will be able to actually
Again, 4 good core stage engines,
see the sun, but everything looks like it is going nominally. We have hit most of the milestones that we're really looking for here. The next big milestone will be that core stage, that giant orange component will actually fall away and then burn back up in the atmosphere, sending the Orion spacecraft on its
42 seconds into the mission. We are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center.
So one of the big things you can see in this graphic here, that the rocket is horizontal to the Earth. So launching a rocket, you don't just launch it straight up into space. Getting up actually isn't the hardest thing. The hardest thing is actually getting sideways into somewhat of an Earth orbit. So many of the rockets actually turn sideways and use much of their propellant energy to keep themselves into a Earth orbit, which will keep them from falling back to Earth.
About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust.
All right, so everything is still running maximum thrust. We are looking good. Hopefully we'll get some footage from onboard.
Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control, Houston.
Quiet is good. We like quiet. We can see down at the bottom on our graphic here a couple of milestones.
The 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down.
So the main engines are throttling down, which means we are into our low Earth orbit. And then that core stage should fall away any minute
30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down. Now 7 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control,
Love to hear it, Toby.
We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff.
All right, so we should have the main stage cutoff right here, and then the core stage fall away.
And confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit.
All right, so we are there. This is the main stage cutaway right there. That is the Orion spacecraft with that ICPS underneath it.
Call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad.
All right, so they're going to jump back to the space station. It sounds like we have a few minutes before we hit our next benchmark here. So let's jump in. I'm going to pull over some of the videos here, and we can see, because we were unable to see it there, they didn't have any videos of the They didn't have any videos of what actually went on while it was doing that. And since we were in the dark on it, let's see if we can get a outline. I know they have it on here, and I should have it up. Come on, come on, come on. There we go. Let's go to the Artemis graphics videos. Artemis video. Nope, that's not it. We want to go to this, the animation reel. All right, so I found the video, the animation reel that I was looking for earlier. And let's go to everything that we just saw. So this is the graphics of what just happened, but obviously with a little bit of light on them. So we had that initial liftoff that was just absolutely incredible. May have brought me to a little bit of tears, but that's okay. So we have our initial, we saw the engines being ignited. Our giant RS-25 engines being ignited. Come on. There we go. Our RS-25 engines being ignited. The umbilical towers being pulled away here. And then the rocket heading off into low Earth orbit. So our initial liftoff there. We can see the core stage and the booster rockets. Here's a nice shot from on board the rocket. And then the rocket actually heading up. And this is what we were watching when we saw that from a distance. The first thing we're going to see are these booster rockets actually fall away from the main rocket itself. And then our core stage will continue on. So getting into low Earth orbit, Cape Canaveral there in the background. And that arc that we were talking about, not just going straight up, but actually arcing to the side to get itself into Earth orbit. There's the launch abort system on the front of the Orion spacecraft. And there we go. Those are the main booster rockets actually propelling themselves away from the rocket itself. And then we will see the main, the core stage. So those protective shells out there, launch abort system jettisoning. The launch abort system, I believe, will return to Earth's atmosphere and burn itself up. And then our core stage here, the giant orange liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks falling away there. And there is the Orion spacecraft with that ICPS, the interim cryogenic propulsion system, on the backside there. So the Orion spacecraft on the front, ICPS in the back. This is what we're waiting for next. The next milestone will be the fold out of the solar arrays. The batteries on board the Orion spacecraft, you can imagine the amount of computing power going on board right now requires a lot of electricity. So those batteries will not last very long. So those solar arrays will come out. They'll go into this folded back position, and then they'll start generating electricity from the sun. There's the ICPS, that interim cryogenic propulsion system, allowing the Orion spacecraft to slingshot around the Earth and propelling the Orion spacecraft. Once it gets into that final translunar injection, which will send it on its path to the moon, the ICPS will then fall away. At that point, it's about a 2-day journey for the Orion spacecraft to actually reach lunar orbit. So this is where we will conclude the stream for today. Once we hear that the ICPS has fallen away, that's where we will end it. And then there's a few other things that will go on, but let's jump back into that live stream and see what we... Oh, don't want to pause. What we have going on here. So back at Mission Control. And it looks like the audio, it doesn't look like we have any audio here, but that's Charlie Blackwell right there. So the launch director on the left side there. First female launch director. Pretty historic moment for her. And it looks like she's about to make an announcement, perhaps. The rocket still on its way. It will do a circuitous loop, so a half loop around the Earth, at which point it will use Earth's gravity to propel itself into Earth's orbit. That ICPS will...
Is here?
Can you guys hear me?
Pam Melroy.
Oh, there we go.
All right, it looks like we got some audio going on here. A little announcement from Charlie Blackwell.
Well, for once, I might be speechless. So you guys know I have talked a lot about appreciating the moment that you're in. And we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment.
There's mission control down there, all the different stations.
It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You have earned this moment. You have earned your place in history. You were part of a first. Doesn't come along very often. Once in a career, maybe. But we are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars. What you have done today will inspire generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for your resilience. You know, I said at the pre-test briefing, the harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations. So we got a couple of traditions here in launch control. And the first one is when you're in the position for the first time, you get a tie cutting. And so I have my launch director scissors. And I'm going to get my tie cut by a couple of legends that are here. And then anyone who wants their tie cut will be making the rounds in the firing room. You got your console chiefs, if they want to do it, that's fine. If you want me to do it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all night if I have to. It'll be my pleasure to cut ties. So I'm going to take care of mine, and then I have one other presentation that I want to make this evening.
The Artemis 1 mission and the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we've just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning
Someone
our focus
accidentally muted himself and hasn't.
Spacecraft
No one's
was
been able
running
to hear
on
me
battery
for the
power,
past
but
2
stretching
minutes.
these wings
So,
will allow it to stop relying on those batteries
solid.
and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit and all the way back to Earth. Once these are properly configured, again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about 30 minutes after liftoff. Right now, we're 19 minutes since liftoff today. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour.
All right, so it looks like we have about another 15 minutes before the solar arrays are actually deployed, and then we will have that TLI burn. Here you can see the translunar injection burn that will actually put the Orion spacecraft into orbit. Thank you, crew. That will actually put the spacecraft back into lunar orbit, and then, put it out of Earth orbit and send it on its way to the moon. So since it is a few minutes away, I'm going to turn it over to the NASA live stream here, and we will jump back in once we get into those final burns that will send us on our way to the lunar orbit. It looks like we are getting some footage. So this... come on, they keep cutting away from it. There must be some issues with that footage, but there we go. So we have some live footage. I believe this is from the solar arrays as they're being deployed. Not the greatest feed we're getting there, but it is coming from space, so I will cut them some slack. But those live images coming from the solar panels as they are being deployed, and I'm sure we could get some awesome images of the Earth in the background. If we could get the right angles here. There's Earth from the Artemis spacecraft. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Hopefully we will get those streams a little bit more consistently. But we can see the solar array deploying here. The sun glinting off the system. And it looks like they just keep cutting out. So maybe some communication setbacks there. Or we're just getting quick 2-minute clips or 2-second clips. They like teasing us. But we are getting some live footage from the spacecraft itself. Pretty cool stuff. All right, back at the Mission Control Center here, so you can see all those different stations. Beautiful view of the Earth there in the background. Some pretty cool trajectory screens. We can see the world map up on the screen there in Mission Control.
European service module. It's comprised of 20,000 parts and components. The service module was developed as part of an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, or ESA. This is the first time NASA is using a European-built system as a critical element to power an American spacecraft.
All right, so it looks like we're going into a hold. We'll see if we get some more of those videos as we go. Truly an absolutely historic moment, something we've been waiting for a very long time. And I know many of you joined us earlier this year when the mission was scrubbed, and we unfortunately were unable to watch it go. But again, the launch itself, a pretty historic moment. The launch itself, I know, was quick, and it's with the magic of YouTube, we may be able to jump right back in and maybe run through it one more time, because I was chilled and goosebumpy there. So let's jump back and we'll watch it launch one more time. So those last 30 seconds here, and we'll listen to Mission Control.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon.
Instant
Launch team
replay.
can no longer recycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
Our ignition system, the sparks igniting those booster rockets.
7.
Sound suppression,
6,
water system,
5,
the water pouring out that we
4-stage
talked about
engine
earlier,
start.
and there's the full ignition
3,
of the
2,
engines.
1. Boosters in ignition.
And there
And
goes
lift
the
off of Artemis
SLS.
1.
An
we rise
absolute
together,
amazing scene
back to
right
the
there.
moon and beyond.
Blasting off, you can hear the thunderous roar of those engines, and these cameras are miles away picking up
All
that
4
sound.
RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour.
You can see the rocket boosters going there. Core stage is lit, and we'll activate later on. So, an absolutely unbelievable moment. Prepare to see lots and lots of that video. I'm sure it's going to be all over the news, and I'm sure social media. In the morning, you will see that initial launch there, and maybe even some other clips that we can see from Orion itself in space. But apparently the clips are going to be very short because they're not giving us much to work with right now. That the interim cryogenic propulsion system, we were waiting for the burn from that, which will set this on course. I believe we're about 5 minutes away from that last boost, which will send us on the path to the moon. Looking at a couple of the different systems here in mission control, you can see just a plethora of screens, all kinds of data being interpreted and read and checked over, telemetry, the angle, all the systems being run, the electronics on board, everything being checked through.
And with our launch at 1:41 Eastern Time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 seconds into the flight, and we have a complete deployment of all 4 solar arrays.
All right, so there's our solar arrays.
Orion's journey to the moon continues as planned. Again, looking forward to that perigee raise maneuver. That'll be coming up again at about 53 minutes into the mission, so about 27 minutes from now. During the perigee raise maneuver, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will use its RL-10 engine to lift the lowest point of Orion in Earth's orbit. The current orbit is more of an oval shape than a perfect circle, and this burn will raise that point closest to Earth and make the orbit more circular. This will also include a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays.
All right, so there's the final calls right there. We have about 27 more minutes until we have our next milestone. So at this point, since it is 2:15 in the morning, and I encourage all of my students to jump on board, I am going to give them the signal to go back to bed at this point, where I will most likely be finding myself pretty soon, and hope to see everybody bright and early tomorrow morning. We will definitely be checking out some of the new updated stuff and some of the things that have happened since then. So again, that translunar injection, if you want to jump onto the live stream that we have been viewing here is NASA's live stream, and they will keep it live, I'm sure, all the way up through that translunar injection point. So I want to thank everybody for joining us wherever you joined us from. If you are joining us from somewhere where it is not as late as it is here, lucky you, because at 2:15 in the morning, we're definitely feeling some of that time. So we're going to hit the hay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I look forward to talking to all of you and keeping up to date on the Artemis mission as it makes its 2-day journey to the moon. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see everybody again next time.